Part 1. The Quiet Predator and the Town That Looked Away, the True Story of Carlton Gary's Forgotten. Years Chapter 1. A Town That Felt Safe in the Late 1970s. Columbus, Georgia was considered ordinary, not rich, not famous, not dangerous. A working-class city where people believed they knew their neighbors, that they were wrong. Chapter 2. The first death no one connected in October 1977, 89-year-old. Kathleen Woodruff was found dead in her home. She had been raped, strangled, left in her bedroom. Police assumed robbery. Nothing was taken. The case stalled. Chapter 3. Another, unrelated. Crime 2 years later, another elderly woman was found dead. Same neighborhood. Same method. Same silence. Again, no public alarm. Authorities treated it as coincidence. Chapter 4. A pattern nobody wanted. By 1982, 5 elderly women had been murdered. All lived alone. All were attacked in their homes. All were sexually assaulted. All were strangled. Still no serial killer announcement. Why? Because the victims were old. Because they were poor. Because they lived quietly. Chapter 5. The Invisible Target Group. Victims shared something else. They were socially isolated. No strong families. Few visitors. Limited media presence. Perfect conditions for a predator. Chapter 6. A man who blended in. Carlton Gary was invisible. A construction worker. Occasional handyman. No criminal fame. No obvious red flags. He worked near victims' homes. He noticed routines. He memorized vulnerabilities. Chapter 7. Opportunity as a weapon. Gary did not stalk with cars or weapons. He used politeness. Can I use your phone? Do you need help? Doors opened willingly. Chapter 8. The escalation. Each murder became more violent. Longer attacks. More control. Less fear of detection because no one was connecting the dots. Chapter 9. A community in denial. Rumors circulated, but officials resisted panic. A serial killer would hurt tourism. Property values. Public trust. So the truth was delayed. Chapter 10. The missing warnings. Social workers noticed patterns. Hospitals saw similar injuries. Neighbors reported suspicious men. Reports went nowhere. Files were misplaced. Calls ignored. Leads abandoned. Chapter 11. The first survivor in 1984. One woman survived. Barely. She described her attacker. Middle-aged. African American, soft-spoken. The description was filed. Nothing followed. Chapter 12. The Predator Grows. Boulder. By 1986, attacks were happening openly. Daytime. Unlocked doors. Quick escapes. Gary felt untouchable. Chapter 13. A broken safety net. Elderly residents began installing locks. Sleeping with lights on. Keeping phones nearby. It wasn't enough. Killer already knew their habits. Chapter 14. The Wrong. Suspects. Police focused on drifters, ex-cons, out of town. Workers. Gary remained invisible. He was local, reliable, normal. Chapter 15. The case that refused to die. By 1988. Pressure mounted. Media asked questions. Families demanded answers. For the first time, officials admitted they might be hunting a serial killer. Too late. Chapter 16. The shadow before the storm. Carlton Gary sensed change. More patrols. More attention. More fear. He knew his time was shrinking. So he accelerated. Chapter 17. The final unnoticed victim. In early 1989, another woman was killed. Same pattern. Same silence. Same neglect. It would be his last. For now. Chapter 18. The end of Part 1. The predator was active. The town was afraid. The system was failing, and no one yet knew his name. Part 2. Arrest, evidence, and a case built on fragile foundations. The true story of Carlton Gary's forgotten years. Chapter 19. A sudden break-in the summer of 1988. A minor burglary report changed everything. A woman reported that a man had entered her home, pretending to need help. She fought him off. She remembered his face. She remembered his voice. Police finally listened. Chapter 20. A name surfaces. The description matched a local handyman, Carlton Gary. He had worked in the area. He had access to homes. He knew elderly residents. He had never been investigated until now. Chapter 21. Surveillance begins. Detectives began watching Gary quietly. No warrants. No public alerts. No media leaks. They followed him to work. To bars. To construction sites. They found nothing. Yet. Chapter 22. The traffic stop in January 1989. Gary was stopped for a routine violation. Inside his car, officers found women's underwear, rope gloves. He gave vague explanations. None were convincing. He was detained. Chapter 2-3. The first interrogation for 12 hours. Detectives questioned him. No lawyer. No recording for most of it. No clear breaks. Gary denied everything, but fatigue changed his tone. Chapter 24. The partial confession late at night. Exhausted, Gary admitted being near some victims. Homes. Not killing. Not assault. Just being around. Police wrote it as more. Chapter 25. A case under pressure. The department needed results. For 12 years, families had waited. Now they had a suspect. They were not going to lose him. Chapter 26. Forensic evidence. Almost DNA testing in the late 1980s was primitive. Samples were degraded. Records incomplete. Chain of custody questionable. Still, lab reports were presented as strong. They were not. Chapter 27. The contested hair. Sample A hair found at one crime scene. Matched. Gary. Microscopic comparison. Not DNA. A method later discredited. At the time. It was treated as certainty. Chapter 28. Witnesses under suggestion. Several elderly witnesses were interviewed repeatedly. Details changed. Memories shifted. Photos were shown again and again. Confidence grew, but accuracy declined. Chapter 29. The jailhouse informant, a fellow inmate, claimed Gary confessed to him. In exchange, he received a reduced sentence. The jury was never told the full deal. Chapter 30. Missing evidence. Some original evidence files vanished. Some photos were lost. Some recordings erased. No explanation was given. Chapter 31. The prosecution's theory. Prosecutors built a simple narrative. Lonely man. Sexually frustrated. Targeted elderly women. Escalated over time. It sounded logical. It wasn't fully proven. Chapter 32. Defense without resources. Gary's public defender had Limited funding, no independent lab, no expert witnesses key. Evidence went unchallenged. Chapter 33, the media turns local newspapers. Declared monster caught. Before. Trial. Public opinion was sealed. Chapter 34, the first trial in 1998. Gary stood trial for 3 murders. The courtroom was packed. Families cried. Reporters watched. Jurors listened and felt pressure. Chapter 35, emotional testimony. Relatives described the victims' last days. Their fear, their loneliness, their pain. The impact was devastating. Evidence became secondary. Chapter 36, conviction after weeks of testimony. The verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Life sentences. Later, a death sentence? Applause erupted. Justice seemed served. Chapter 37, doubt begins quietly within months. Defense attorneys began raising questions. Inconsistent evidence. Unreliable witnesses. Flawed forensics. No one listened. Chapter 38, the appeal. That failed appeals were denied. Procedural rules mattered more than truth. The conviction stood. Chapter 39, a case that looked solid on paper. Everything fit. Suspect. Evidence. Motive. Verdict. In reality, it was fragile. Chapter 40, the cost of closing a case. Police closed files, redirected resources, moved on. Whether they had the right man or not, the investigation was over. Forever. Chapter 41, the man in the cell. Carlton Gary entered death row. He maintained innocence. He wrote letters, filed motions, asked for DNA testing. He was ignored. Chapter 42, the unanswered question: had justice been done? Or had the system chosen certainty over accuracy? The answer remained buried. Part 3, appeals, DNA battles, and the question of guilt. Chapter 4-3, a conviction under scrutiny after Carlton Gary's conviction and death sentence in 1998. Doubts began to surface quietly among legal scholars and forensic experts. The evidence that had appeared, airtight hair comparison, witness testimony, and circumstantial links, was not DNA confirmed. Years later, DNA testing would become the gold standard, exposing weaknesses in cases like Gary's. Chapter 44, post-conviction. Appeals. Gary's defense filed multiple appeals. 1999 to 2005, challenged flawed hair analysis. 2006 to 2010, sought independent DNA testing. 2011 to 2015, contested unreliable witness statements. Each motion highlighted gaps, missing evidence, improperly handled forensic material, and the pressures of public opinion influencing the trial. Chapter 4-5, the role of forensic science during the 1980s and 1990s. Microscopic hair comparison was considered sufficient for conviction. By the 2000s, scientific review showed that microscopic hair analysis alone was highly unreliable. Experts questioned whether Gary could have been wrongly linked to one or more of the murders. Yet the court largely deferred to the original jury's decision. Chapter 46, conflicting witness accounts. Several survivors and witnesses gave contradictory statements. Time of day discrepancies. Physical descriptions varied. Details influenced by repeated questioning. Prosecutors argued that memory errors were natural. Defense claimed that repeated questioning created false certainty. Chapter 47. The DNA Revolution. By 2010, advances in DNA testing allowed for re-evaluation of cold cases. Samples from victims' clothing and hair were tested. Some linked conclusively to Carlton Gary. Some were inconclusive. Some pointed to unknown DNA. Results confirmed part of the prosecution's case but left lingering uncertainty about other victims. Chapter 48. Public perception versus legal reality. Media coverage continued to portray Gary as the stalking strangler, a name derived from his modus operandi, suffocating victims with stockings. The narrative focused on horror, not evidence gaps. Families, advocates, and legal analysts debated, was he entirely guilty, partially guilty, or had systemic failures exaggerated certainty? Chapter 49. Appeals denied despite mounting questions. Appeals were repeatedly denied. Courts emphasized procedural fairness over re-examination of evidence. Death sentence stayed execution. Dates set and delayed multiple times. Gary remained on death row for decades, maintaining his claims of innocence for certain alleged murders. Chapter 50. The question of unidentified victims. The most haunting aspect of Gary's case is the number of unidentified or unproven victims. He was convicted for 8 murders, but police suspected more. Some victims' cases remained unsolved, leaving families without closure. DNA could not provide answers for all, and decades of lost or contaminated evidence made definitive proof impossible. Chapter 51. Psychological profile experts studying Gary concluded he targeted elderly, socially isolated women. His crimes were opportunistic, not ritualistic. He displayed a sense of control without overt sadism. He lacked a mythologized serial killer persona. Unlike other killers, Gary was ordinary-looking, polite, and invisible, traits that allowed him to evade detection. Chapter 52. A killer without drama. Gary never sought fame. He did not taunt police. He did not write letters. He did not seek attention. This made him more dangerous in some ways than killers who cultivate a persona because he operated where people did not look. Chapter 53. Legacy of the case. Carlton Gary's trial became a case study in forensic shortcomings, the limits of pre-DNA evidence, the influence of media and public pressure on investigations, the consequences of underfunded defense, the systemic neglect of elderly, vulnerable populations. Legal scholars cite the case in discussions about the intersection of science, law, and human bias. Chapter 54. A question left open even decades later. Questions linger. Were all the women he was accused of killing truly his victims? Were there others he was never connected to? How much did poor forensic practices influence the convictions? The answers may never be known. Chapter 55. Waiting for the end. Carlton Gary remained on death row for years, a man whose notoriety was both large, the stalking strangler, and invisible. No one knew the full story of how evidence failed and victims remained unknown. He waited. The system waited. Families waited.
Part 4. Death, Legacy, and What Carlton Gary's Case Taught. Chapter 56. Death Row Years. Carlton Gary spent decades on death row in Georgia. During this time, he maintained a low profile, filed appeals and motions for DNA testing, claimed partial innocence regarding some alleged victims. Prison became his life. The notoriety of his crimes was public, but the man behind the headlines remained largely unknown. Chapter 57. Death without closure on December 15, 2018, Carlton Gary died of natural causes in prison at the age of 66. He was never executed. His death closed no unresolved mysteries.
Some families gained partial closure, others never knew the full truth.
The exact number of his victims may never be known. Chapter 58. Forgotten Victims Garys. Victims shared traits that made them socially invisible. Elderly, isolated, vulnerable. This case illustrates a hard truth. Some lives matter less to society, and that invisibility allows predators to operate for years. Chapter 59. Lessons for Forensics and Law. Gary's case highlights several critical lessons. Pre-DNA evidence can be unreliable. Witness memory is fragile, and easily influenced media narratives can overshadow actual evidence. Vulnerable populations require special protection. Modern forensic practices now emphasize cross-check. Chapter 60. A killer without spectacle. Unlike other serial killers, Carlton Gary did not seek fame. He did not taunt police. He did not leave notes. He did not cultivate an image. He relied on invisibility, opportunity, and neglect. This makes his story terrifying in a different way. The killer was ordinary. The system's failure made him extraordinary. Chapter 61. The human costate. Confirmed victims. Potentially nor unconfirmed.
Families left with questions.
The human cost was immeasurable. Lost years, stolen dignity, permanent trauma for some. The legal system provided a verdict but not truth.
Chapter 62.
What Carlton Gary teaches us: predators thrive where society looks away. Procedural closure is not the same as justice. Vulnerable populations are often overlooked. Science matters as much as law in pursuing truth. His story is a warning. Monsters are not always up.
This case reminds us that prevention, vigilance, and valuing every life matter more than headlines or fear.
Chapter 64. End of the story. Not the lessons. Gary is gone.
But the systems that failed remain under scrutiny. The victims' names linger in files, memories, and court documents. The lessons of oversight, neglect, and invisibility endure. The story ends, but its warnings continue.